from New York and on the new Hot 97 app. Ebro in the morning on Hot 97.
It's Ebro in the morning. Laura Stiles, Rosenberg. Look, it's early, so we got to clean up our,
Get the newspapers. All right, yeah.
Yeah, we usually don't have guests this early.
Representative Cedric Richmond.
Yes.
Give it up for him one time. Representing the 2nd District of Louisiana, New Orleans, to be specific.
Thanks for having me this morning.
Listen, New Orleans, Louisiana, everybody in this room loves.
Well, thank you. We love
I used
it
to
too.
go down there for the Bayou Classics back in the 90s. Shout out to my man Wild Wayne and DJ Rowe and Q93 and 80 Barry and everybody down there.
That's the crew. And look, let me tell you, Wild Wayne still putting it down with
Yes.
the kids. We just did a thing the other morning with the DEA and others talking about opioid addiction. Wayne's been in the game a long time, but he hasn't left the battlefield of trying to save our children. So it's important.
Talk about I'd love to hear the dynamic of politics in a state like Louisiana. And the reason I bring this up is because you have a city like New Orleans, which is a historically black city, right? But you have a state that is a historically Republican red, and what we associate up here in New York City with redneck, racist, Confederate flags. That's the whole imagery. You bring up Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, any of that for us, we think Confederate flags. I'd love to hear how you, somebody from down there, and dealing with that dynamic.
Well, it's a deep South state. And I tell people this all the time, and I tell the VP this. You can't be a black elected official in the South without being an expert in both black politics and white politics. Mm-hmm. And what we see in Louisiana is kind of what we see with Trump, is that it's easy to convince people to vote against their own self-interest
Based on race.
If you give them an enemy.
That's
and
right.
so what the president did and politicians in Louisiana did far too long was, if you're poor and you're white, it's not your fault. It's the minority's fault because they're skipping the line. They're taking what should belong to you. And so, for example, Trump just came down and did a rally, and I have a governor's race going on. Democratic governor. He's pro-life. He's pro-gun. He has a 67% rating of people thinking the state's going in the right direction, but he only got 47% of the vote. And Trump was able to come down and rally the farmers. And by the way, the soybeans are rotting in the field. Farmers are in line getting subsidies because his trade policy is killing them.
That's right. He hurt the farmers
But
bad.
he can still convince them to vote for him. And that is not based on policy. That's based on something else.
Race.
And that's based on the Democratic Party still paying for Lyndon Johnson, still paying for those things from the civil rights movement. And we're breaking it down a little bit, but it's hard.
Are you able, or culturally down there, is it people openly talk about racism, white supremacy? Is that, because when I bring it up with, people in the music industry that are from there, and I bring up Confederacy, the Confederate flag, how I feel about it, I feel like I want to say people are a little tepid. Like, it's kind of like, yeah, that's over there. We ignore that.
Well, I'll tell you, in New Orleans, it's a little bit different. And because we are so diverse. And, so if you look at our music industry, if you look at our culture, we're a
Very mixed.
We're a melting pot. Outside of New Orleans, that's where you run into the deep love of the history of the Confederate flag. And you have this nostalgia about some reverence about
Being losers.
about people succeeding from the Union and treason against the United States. So it's a difficult task, and I spent 11 years in the state legislature up there. So there was a general animosity towards New Orleans because New Orleans was the urban city in the state. But we're also the economic engine of the state. When you start thinking of the French Quarter, you start thinking of tourism. And so we've come a long way, but I'm not saying that we're where we need to be, but we're certainly not where we were in terms of race relations. So now we talk about it a lot more openly. We just went through that whole battle, Mitch Landrieu's last term, of taking down a Confederate monument.
Right.
Robert E. Lee Circle and all the other monuments, which was a very divisive issue in the city and the state. However, in a city that's majority African American, people should not have to go and see Confederate generals on a pedestal looking down on them, overseeing. And what people forget is most of those monuments and stuff came up
1920s,
not
1930s.
not after the rebellion and the treasonous acts. It came up during civil rights movement, Jim Crow, post-Reconstruction, to remind African Americans how people felt about them. And so it was a learning moment.
Now, that's it may not to some people up here, it may not seem like a big deal to remove things like that, even though we still frankly have things like that up here as well. But in a state where David Duke was, at my childhood, David Duke was maybe the most prominent racist, open racist in America, and grew to real success in Louisiana in the 80s and 90s. So to think about where we are today, I mean, that does show progress.
It does. And look, I'm not proud of this, but it is what it is. David Duke ran for governor and got over 43% of the vote. That means 4 out of 10 people in Louisiana voted for a former Grand Wizard of the Klan, an openly racist white supremacist. And he's still around.
Still active.
I saw an article yesterday that he's still out here talking about his love for Donald Trump. And, that would make me look in the mirror. If I had a guy like David Duke saying, oh, Cedric Richmond's the best thing since sliced bread, I'd have to really take a look at myself to say, what am I doing to have somebody so evil praising me? And,
we talked about it on the show 1,000 times. What is our saying? What we
not every Donald Trump supporter is a racist, but every racist is a Donald Trump supporter.
I've heard that often.
It's facts. Now, if there was ever a moment, right, people try to throw the Confederate flag under the freedom of speech, which I don't think that necessarily applies, because I feel like that is it's intimidation, it's terrorism, it's reminding people of a time in this nation, and I feel like it's hate speech. I feel like it's straight. I feel like the Confederate flag represents hate speech, and people try to code it and switch it and change it.
Well, people also try to hide it under like Southern pride too.
Right.
We've heard that a lot.
Would you ever support a situation where we could vote to have the Confederate flag imagery put under that?
Part of it is
and banned.
Part of it's how it's used, and I'm not defending it at all, because I think that one, it's used too often to reinforce a inferiority of black people.
That's right.
And remind us how far we've come,
or have not come, or
have not come. But at some point, I, especially with my Little League players and others, I follow this philosophy. It's not what they call you, it's what you answer to. And sometimes you have to take what's theirs. And so, look, I am a big proponent of you take the flag and you remind people what it is. It's the symbol of the losing side in the Civil War. You take it and say, this is what people hide behind when they can't hide behind issues. But there are, and unfortunately, through the process, I met people who still couldn't understand what the flag means to so many minorities who say, well, I had a great-grandfather, somebody who died in the war. And you're like, wait, hold on. They died trying to keep African Americans enslaved. I understand that was your family member, but far too often it's what it means. But I'd be very careful with just the all-out ban, but I do think that it should be included and can be used as evidence in a hate crime and such matters like that. So I think it's not splitting hairs, but just an all-out ban, I think that, we probably could run into First Amendment issues.
Now, Congressman, you are also the co-chair for Joe Biden's campaign. Would you say that last night was his best effort at a debate thus far?
It was a good night last night. And I think that what he's doing is reminding people, one, who we have in the White House, two, what we have to lose. And, when Hillary Clinton was the nominee, for a lot of our segment of our population, she wasn't good enough. But, we have a binary choice in most of these elections. And if you weren't voting for Hillary, you basically were de facto voting for Donald Trump. And I think he's reminding people that this guy won before. Nobody thought he could win, but he won. And the things he's done since he's been president, people never thought a president would do, never could get away with. So when he says we're fighting for the soul of the country, he means it and he believes it. And look, I had been talking to him a long time about running for president. But for Charlottesville, he would not be running for president of the United States.
That was the moment that pushed him fully into running?
That was the moment when the president said there were good people on both sides. The vice president took notice and then took an audit of where we are in this country, where we're going in this country. And so when he announced, he said he wanted to do three things: restore the soul of the country, rebuild the middle class, and then restore our standing on the world stage. So a lot of his programs and policies that he announced, his education policy, is designed specifically in mind with helping those people who need some help to get to where they want to go and where they should be. So whether it's tripling Title I funding, whether it's free HBCUs, 2 years at HBCUs, 2 years at community colleges, it's really about investing in people. And so I'm excited about it.
Do you feel like his programs are aggressive enough for especially for the under 35 voter, right? I feel like the under 35 voter, the newer voter, wants somebody who is more assertive than what we're hearing from Joe Biden.
Look, I think his plans are very aggressive. I think part of the drawback, and I'll be honest with you, is that the difficulty in really communicating that plan. And I remember being on the road for Hillary Clinton all over the country. And after the campaign, I went back on the road to HBCUs to see what happened. They were like, well, criminal justice plan wasn't good enough. I said, well, wait, hold on. I was involved in that. It was one of the most progressive ever. What was the problem with it? And then finally a kid said, you know what? It wasn't all about the plan. You know, we just thought she felt entitled for the job. And so we have to make sure that people understand it. So his criminal justice plan, for example, is the best that I've ever seen in my life. It starts with Bobby Scott's bill, which we tried to do 2 Congresses ago. And it starts there and it goes very far with automatic expungements, things like that, decriminalizing marijuana. But, you know, and you can't talk about, far too often in our communities, we talk about crime, but we don't talk about education and business opportunities, economic development, because they're all related to that. That's right. And he knows it. So that's why you have an aggressive investment in education, whether it's the money for HBCUs, whether it's the $900 million that he wants to put in 40 specific inner cities to help combat gun violence. So we can talk about banning assault weapons all day long, but if we don't get into those cities and actually address the PTSD that our kids go through because of the gun violence, then I don't think we're doing everything we should. And you still have to give people a meaningful way to make a living wage so that they can support a family, because far too often where I grew up and what I hear is I'm going to get it how I live. And that means if I can't find that way to do it legally and in a positive manner, I'm going to find it some other way. And I think that the best compliment I ever give to a politician, and Joe Biden isn't the only one that I give it to, is they get it. And I think he gets the struggle. The struggle is real. And so that's why, you know, I'm supporting him. And we're probably an odd couple, you know, a young black dude from New Orleans and a older white guy from
Joe Biden hangs out with young black dudes, man.
From Philadelphia and Scranton.
So,
so you know, it's a little different, but it's good, and I think he gets it.
Look, I think we all up here have liked Joe Biden, right? I think what I brought up previously with him not being, or me not feeling, that some of his alignments with regard to taxing the super wealthy, the wealth tax, talking about the wealth tax last night, and the math, where you're talking about, you know, people who are billionaires having to pay 2 cents on a dollar after 50 million, you know what I mean? And actually doing that math, like I think, and I saw it last night with Tom Steyer being on stage. Tom Steyer has some great plans. Nobody wants to hear a billionaire's plans. And it's like, oh, so you want to tax yourself? And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. Let's change the tax code. But nobody wants to hear Tom Steyer. And I like Tom Steyer, but he's a billionaire. I think some of those things happen with Joe Biden where it's kind of like, it's the same old guy. He's been in there. Is he really going to do anything? Can we actually believe him? Status quo. The reason Trump won a lot of those votes, yes, the racial component and the backlash of Barack, but a lot of it was a middle finger to Washington, D.C., because people don't want the same old things.
Well, I think he was talking a good game.
Well, he's a liar.
And I think
Trump.
that far too many people fell for it. But I'll tell you, being on the road with the vice president, going to homes where they had fundraisers where people are paying a lot to come to the fundraiser, and campaigns are based on that. But he gets up and tells the same speech. You all are going to pay more.
That's right.
The people in this room are going to pay more because we have to improve this country and we need resources to do it, and we're going to get those resources from you. So all of his plans cost money, but part of it, and I'm trying to find a very careful way to word this, because let me tell you, I like Elizabeth Warren. I like Cory Booker. I like Kamala Harris. Both Kamala and Cory supported me when I became Black Caucus Chair. I maxed out to both of them in the campaign. I like them. But at some point, you have to make a decision where a plan is very overly ambitious or whether it's unrealistic.
Well, Joe Biden does talk a lot about actually being able to get things done, right? Because a lot of the candidates have great ideas. But we talk about that here. It's a great idea. It sounds great. Great marketing.
Right.
Not actually going to get done. Won't get across the line.
Right. Remember, look, I'm from Louisiana where we had people promising, a chicken in every pot. At some point, it has, if you're an honest politician, you have to tell people where you would like to go, but you have to paint the picture of the incremental steps to get there.
Representative Cedric Richmond, you were saying incremental progress with regard to trying to get things across the line, right? Actual policy that can get things accomplished, and you feel like Biden has that.
I do. I think you have to have some very bold, you have to have a bold vision. You have to know where you want to go, and you have to know how you want to get there. And I believe that it doesn't do anyone any good to profess policies, anything that we just can't get there. And look, my friends have been in the Senate now for a while. Those things that they're talking about, if they could be done, they would have done them by now. And we know how many votes we have in the Senate, and we have to figure out how to do it. Now, the one thing Biden does have is a track record of banning assault weapons, Violence Against Women Act, and all of those things. But, the good news is anybody on that debate stage, I would take over Donald Trump.
I mean, I think that's
And so
most of us.
a debate of ideas is not a bad thing in the Democratic Party.
If Donald Trump is not impeached, okay, if he is not successfully removed from office, which there's a high probability he won't be, and he's not voted out and he's president in 2020, has the office of president, that office, the highest executive office in the land, has the standard completely been shifted forever? And have we lowered our bar and expectation?
Absolutely, and we set a very bad precedent, which is you have somebody in the office that will look at the American people and just lie, call the press the enemy of the people so that people don't believe what's reported.
And he's technically above the law.
And
be above the law.
And above the law. So at some point, we go so far away from our norm that we have a country that we don't recognize anymore. And that's a real fear, especially for black people. If you think about since he's been president, can't go to Starbucks and have a meeting without the police being called on you. You can't fall asleep in your dorm at Yale without the police being called on you. You can't barbecue in the park in Oakland without the police being called on you. You can't be in your home playing with your nephew at 2 a.m. without being shot through the window. All of a sudden, this president has made it okay for people to be fearful of their life simply because I'm a black male or a black person or Muslim. And so, look, so often I say we're better than this, but the truth of the matter is right now we're not. And so we can say we're better than this. The truth of the matter is we can say we used to be better than this, and you can say we're going to be better than this again. But right now we're not better than that.
I think it's a lie. I think it's a lie to say we used to be better than this. I think we're lying to ourselves because we know all of this stuff used to be here. It just wasn't. People weren't emboldened, and it wasn't like seen by certain groups as okay behavior. But I think that's what's happening right now is you have a segment of society that is like, this is the way it goes.
But he normalized it. When he said you had good people on both sides, there are no good people marching through a campus with tiki talks saying the things that they were saying. There are no good people in that. And for him to just utter it shows he is exactly who we think he is and who we know he is. We just have to wait for the rest of the country to catch up.
Sorry, go ahead, Laura.
I read that you support impeachment. But do you think that's something that's really going to happen? Because, I don't know, to me it seems like I just don't see it being a realistic thing.
In the House, it's going to be a realistic thing, in my opinion. Look, the Ukraine stuff, and look, I was there with the at least five acts of obstruction in the Mueller report. I know conspiracy when I see it. I was a criminal defense attorney. I've seen many people go to jail for a lot less, and I've been involved in those cases. Those five acts of obstruction are one thing, but when you call a foreign country and ask for help in a presidential election, that is an abuse of power. It's illegal to solicit help in a U.S. election from a foreign national. And I think that might be a bridge too far, even for some of his supporters. So you see the impeachment poll numbers going up gradually. And look, I think Rudy Giuliani got a subpoena today in a federal investigation.
Yeah, and he threw up the middle finger to it. What does that mean when they're like, yeah, I'm not going to acknowledge that? F out of here. What does that mean?
It's one thing to say that to Congress, because we have not shown that we would take people. We have the ability to arrest you and hold you in the Capitol.
Let's get to it.
But to do it to a U.S. Attorney's office is a completely different thing. And so I think that with the dual track of investigations going on, I think we will get to the absolute bottom of this, because there are still people who are in this administration that are not going to go under oath and lie. And that's what we've been seeing in the interviews over the last week. We have interviews every day this week. I think that this issue will get him impeached. Now, the real question is whether it's enough to get him removed by the Senate after a trial.
Right.
And unless some Republican senators develop a conscience or grow some courage, it's highly unlikely. However, it depends on how much comes out.
I just want to say, because politicians bring up polls, which in a sense is listening to the people, right? And I don't know which people participate in polls when they have the landline poll. Who got a landline? I don't know. I just want to say that regular folks that I talk to and that probably listen to this program and probably watching this on YouTube, if the people who claim we should continue to participate and vote and do all these things really want the people that are the citizens of the United States to continue to believe in y'all, we need to start seeing some people get arrested. Like, we need to see, like, when somebody can publicly say they got subpoenaed, I'm not paying attention to that. When that can happen, the rest of us, we just go, oh, well, they just get to do whatever they want. The rest of us, we don't believe y'all. We do not believe that you guys have the power to actually make this government what you say you want it to be.
And I think you'll see some ramped up exercise of strength. And I think that that's basically what you're saying is we have to show the American people that we have the strength.
That you're not playing.
And courage that we're not. And I think you're going to see that. But by the way, if you just look at Trump and his associates from Manafort to others.
They've been put in jail.
There are a bunch that have been put in jail. However, this administration is the most corrupt administration ever to serve. And ignoring Congress is a precedent that you cannot allow to happen.
No.
And there are a lot of us that are screaming and hollering and saying that, we need to exercise our ability to hold people in contempt.
So you're saying you sound like me, just not right now, but up there, when in private, y'all yelling like me.
We want to show people that we're not playing.
Got it.
And that we have the ability that there are consequences and actions to everything. And so I think it's really important to show people that there are consequences for ignoring a congressional subpoena.
Well, but also putting your party ahead of the law. Like, that's problematic on so many levels, where you would literally allow someone to break the law because it benefits the marketing of your political party. That is very bad.
Well, one, they're afraid of this president. They're afraid that he will turn on them, tweet against them, unelect them. But at the end of the day, it was the Republicans when I was elected to Congress and that Tea Party wave that decided we took over the House. We're going to read the Constitution at the beginning of every Congress. Well, go read it now, because this is, and part of where I fall is that, look, this is not politically convenient. Does it help the Democrats? It does not help us. However, we are mandated by the Constitution. We're mandated by the oath we take to always protect this Constitution. It doesn't have to be easy. It doesn't have to be convenient. But we ran for these seats. We decided we wanted to be here. And at this point, people have to step up, put their positions at risk, and do what's required of us, and that is to have a formal impeachment investigation. And I don't care if it's announced by the Speaker or voted on in the House. I don't care. I'm willing to do either one. And then the other part is to do whatever we have to do to get all of the facts out so that the American people can see that this president abused his power, obstructed justice, and is ignoring congressional subpoenas and other things because he does not want the truth to come to light. So, but I am a person that does a belt and suspenders approach. That is dual track, impeachment, and let's try to beat him. And I believe we're going to beat him. And look,
we can do more than one thing at a time.
I've been on social media on the Republican sites and Trump's video because I said maybe a year ago that my sole purpose and my number one focus was to make sure that this president is a one-term president and that in 2020 we do not have him again because I don't think this country can take it, and I know our communities can't survive.
Well, no, and our standing in the world, by the way.
Absolutely. What he's doing in Northern Syria is just criminal.
We look like we're bozos, complete. And everything that everyone's ever said about us is coming true. Everything.
We're proving everybody to be right, that we are selfish. We're only worried about American interests. We had people fighting with us for over 10 years, giving their blood, sweat, and tears and dying for us. And we just turn our backs and run on them knowing that they will be slaughtered. That's just not how I grew up. I don't think that anybody grew up like this. And I don't think Republicans grew up like this. I think this president has always grown up knowing that Donald Trump is the first and only issue in his life. And so the fact that they are willing to let him take them down this road, one is I think is sinful. I think they'll be judged for it one day. But at some point, the country has to stand up and say, we don't turn our back on our allies. Because at some point, we're going to get in a fight. And we're going to start looking for our friends. And our friends are going to say, when we needed you, you weren't there.
Well, and also we heard audio of, Joe Biden saying he would take him out behind the, what did he say? Back when I was in high school, we go out behind the whatever, and we punched a bully in the face. So we're all waiting for Biden to punch him in the face, just so you know. So when you go back and talk to your man Biden, say, yo, listen, you want to win this? Punch Trump in the face.
Well, I'm trying to hold him back. That would be
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
that would be very counter to what
Nah,
what
go
I'm,
for
what
it,
I'm
man.
trying to do.
The gloves are off. We're in uncharted water.
Yeah.
Yo, give it up. Representative Cedric Richmond. He's co-chair for Joe Biden. He's also the congressman from the 2nd District of Louisiana, which is New Orleans.
Look, thanks for having me this morning.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.